Over the last few years or so, maybe more than that, honestly, I've seen quite a few of these podcasts pop up. These are men's dating podcasts, alpha male podcasts, whatever. And they always seem to consist around a few things, a few troubling things, honestly. As a Christian, I'm concerned by this momentum and how much attention these podcasts get. How sometimes people portray them as moral good, that they're doing good work. Meanwhile, I think they're extremely harmful to how men see women. As a Christian, I want to talk about this, so let's dive in. I think you know what kind of podcast I'm talking about, the whatevers of the world, the whatever podcast. It always kind of goes by the same formula. It will be one man or maybe a few men on a podcast with a few women. Usually these women are college age. Maybe they're involved in the sex industry in some way, whether they're prostitutes, whether they're OnlyFans people, whether they're just people that claim to have high body counts. That tends to be the consistent theme. They're just asking them questions, and people are clipping these things, right? Clipping these videos and saying, oh man, how disgusting are women these days? How disgusting are these women? How disgusting are these women? And that tends to be the consistent theme. So men are trying to find women, and the theme is, okay, there's no good women out there because all women are like this. Then there's this topic, then there's this idea that's brought up sometimes of a high value woman, Here's the deal. A high value woman. What does this consist of? What is a high value woman to there? A woman that, has lots of good habits, that's successful, that usually is sexually pure in the sense where they haven't had sex with a lot of people, and they're not, on OnlyFans, and this is a high value woman. Okay. Here's the deal. I think there's a troubling amount of attention put on these women specifically because they're broken, because they've obviously been through a lot of trauma. They obviously have a lot of daddy issues, and I know people often make fun of daddy issues, like this is something to joke about, but legitimately, if you don't grow up with a father, if you grow up with a distant father, and you grow up with that kind of neglect, you understand why these women are looking for love in places that it can never be found, why they're giving their bodies to these men, and they think that I can be loved. I can find some sense of affection, right? And then you get in this cycle and you realize and you feel like that's all you're good for. And people are telling you online when this is all you're good for. And so you start selling yourself, right? And this cycle is just so troubling. And meanwhile, it's just played off as a joke. Played off as, no, these women are in their right minds. They're fine. No, this is sad. It's actually tragic. The second thing is that I would say that the idea of a high value woman is not biblical, and it should not be a terminology that we use as men, especially when talking about women. Okay, here's the deal. I think way too much emphasis was put on women's past than on their present and their future. In a lot of ways, according to this metric system, somebody that has a hard heart, somebody that is really spiritually far from God, but they go to church, they're successful at business, they have some sense of morality, they haven't been with a lot of men, they're a high value woman. Okay. Meanwhile, another person that has, but they've come to God, they have a passion for God, they actually have a soft heart towards Him. They've repented for their past. They're looking to God for their future. This person is worth less. That's the terminology that we're using. That's the language that we're using. Language is important. And for men to use this kind of language about women, I think it's just very harmful. When we look at value, we need to know we were all created in the image of God. Our value does not come from our actions, and there's nothing that we can do to take value away from ourselves, right? It doesn't make us less valuable. And so when we use this kind of terminology in dating or evaluating or whatever, it sends the wrong message. It sends the message that once you've made a mistake once, you know what? You can never be the same. You'll never regain that value that you once had to me. No, you'll always be worth less. That's disgusting. That is contrary to the gospel. That is contrary to the ways of God. That means there's no room for redemption. There's no room for restoration. There's no room for having a new life. because you'll always be defined by your past. What I see within these podcasts and just men's focused dating podcasts and content in general is a distaste for women, Nice guys don't get the girl. Nice guys don't get the girl. It's an anger towards women. There's no pure women out there. There's no women that actually love God out there. We use these sayings, we use this anger to cover up something important. And this might be painful for you to come to terms with, but it needs to be said. This anger is used to cover up our own insecurities about ourselves, about how lovable we are, about whether we are enough, about whether we are wanted, and whether we are something valuable in ourselves. I think the easy move is to say somebody else isn't valuable or somebody else is less valuable than to come to terms with the reality that we feel insecure about ourselves. And maybe that comes from a wound that you've had. Maybe it was a past relationship with somebody that made you feel really small, that made you feel really insignificant, made you feel really unlovable. And that is what's coming out. And I think it often is. And as men, we need to be honest with ourselves about, okay, maybe this frustration that I have, and I know a little bit of like where you guys are if you're still single. Like I was single till I was 24. And even within me, there were pieces, because I hadn't been in any long-term relationships, where I was questioning, like, am I lovable? Am I worthy of being in a relationship? And some of that did come out into anger. Oh, there's no good women out there. Oh, they're just, whatever, all these things. But I needed to look at my own heart and say, Isaac, I think it's just you right now. I think it's you and your own sadness about maybe some of the dreams that you've had about being in a relationship, about being married, haven't come true yet. And some of that bitterness you have towards God is going towards women just in general, and being angry at them. Meanwhile, so many of these women on these podcasts, they got so many issues. And tons of that is fatherlessness. Tons of that is fathers being absent, not giving the affection that is due. That's what's causing a lot of these roots of sexual sin within these women. I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below. What are your experience with these types of podcasts? Have you watched them? Do you currently watch them? What are your thoughts about it? I'd love to hear you. Thank you to everyone who supports on Patreon. And until next time, keep pursuing the mission.